In Uganda, the government has established an International Crimes Division, which is part of the High Court, with the jurisdiction to try serious human rights violations and war crimes, among others. This has been critical because it arose out of the Juba peace process between the government of Uganda and the Lord's Resistance Army in 2006. So far, there's been one trial that has been tested. Unfortunately, because of the amnesty legislation, which is awarded to all those who apply for amnesty in terms of a blanket amnesty, it has not been possible to go through the trial fully. Again, there's also been, through the Amnesty Commission, some level of efforts to work towards reconciliation by way of facilitating reintegration of returnees, especially those from the Lord's Resistance Army, who are mostly former abductees, both male and female. There have also been traditional justice mechanisms which have also tried to sort of carry out cleansing ceremonies as part of healing and facilitating reintegration of returnees. These really have been by far most of the justice and reconciliation efforts. I must also highlight that the country is in the process of designing a transitional justice policy, which highlights the key pillars of transitional justice, so including formal justice mechanisms, including alternative justice mechanisms, including truth-telling, including amnesty, among others. And this is meant to sort of define the processes that would follow through. There is also key legislation that the government has adopted throughout this period, including the International Criminal Court Act, which is part of domesticating the Rome Statute, Uganda being a member state. There is also an amnesty legislation, which is also supposed to sort of facilitate reconciliation and reintegration, although the blanket nature of it has been a challenging effort in terms of facilitating alternative justice processes. I must say Uganda is at the moment going through a transition process. I wouldn't be comfortable to say we are talking of best practices because the processes are pretty much evolving and drawing on lessons from other contexts that have faced similar experiences. I guess what I could say is sort of a good practice, which is also very much at its preliminary phases, which is the creation of a domestic war crimes court, especially because within the continent, this is the first country effort that we have seen in this regard, as part of ensuring the principle of primacy, which is that international criminal courts have an obligation to give first priority to national jurisdictions in terms of trying gross human rights violations and serious crimes, which Uganda as a country has shown by way of creating this division to try and safeguard that jurisdiction for national courts. Of course, mindful also of the fact that Uganda is also referred the first situation to the ICC, which of course is one of the situations then would have to be looked into in terms of defining if the country has the capacity and competency to try those cases. But yes, I would regard that as a good practice so far, despite the challenges of actually getting cases prosecuted through that court. There's a lot of effort that is going into sort of preparation of a comprehensive transitional justice process, especially at a national level as opposed to just regions, which is good. Of course, going forward, as I referred to the issue of developing a transitional justice policy, this is critical to ensure that all the other aspects of transitional justice come into play. So in my view, really the adoption of that policy by cabinet and also approval by parliament would be critical to sort of get these initiatives forward. I must also highlight that in terms of reconciliation, there's a lot of clamor for traditional justice mechanisms to play a strategic role. And I believe empowering those mechanisms, mindful of the challenges of historical inequalities that have defined those structures, especially when it comes to gender and human rights issues, that they should be empowered and sort of resourced to also play a critical role, and also ensuring that if an amnesty regime is maintained, that is refined and harmonized with the rest of the mechanisms to ensure that the process is not only comprehensive or holistic, but also complementary, so as to serve the aims of justice, accountability, and to provide to the victims the aspirations, as have highlighted in a number of ways. What I have appreciated is there's this aspect that transitional justice is the soft form of justice, but really it's not so. But I think I appreciate very much the restorative angle within which the South Africa transitional justice process has taken. Most also profound is really how South Africa has used the platforms that have been historically places of pain and use them, as part of their way of uniting and reconciling, and still use them as building blocks for their unity. For me, I think it's very profound and very inspiring to contexts like ours, where really when we talk about divisions, those are very, very much entrenched. Not necessarily within the way South Africa experienced them, but also from a country where you have economic disparities dividing between the North and the South, which until to date, we're still grappling with how best to have an integrated, inclusive society. I think really what South Africa has overcome and gone thus far, for me, is a very inspiring experience. And of course, another thing that also I learned is that many of the world icons like Mahatma Gandhi, were part and really developed their political philosophies as part of experiencing the South African regime of apartheid, which for me was an eye-opener.